Tuesday, everyone. Tuesday afternoon. I hope you are enjoying your day. It is lunchtime where I am. It's about 12 noon. It is 12 noon. And I'm going to invite some people. What I have learned, I have been doing my conversations over the last maybe month. And what I'm learning is that Instagram can be a little bit tricky. And I have to be a little bit more patient in my expectations. And so I'm going to practice some patience. I see our guest has joined. So a part of this practicing patience is once I accept the invitation or send the invitation for the person to join, it may take a minute. So bear with us as we try. Carla, I'm gonna accept this invite and allow you to come on. Let's see what happens. I'm going to invite some people. That's what I'm going to do in the meantime until Carla joins us. I'm going to invite some people. Okay. It shows that I invited you. Let me know if you are able to accept the request. Oh, it's so tricky. I was telling people that I've been looking at StreamYard, which may be a better solution. I just got to figure that out too. Y'all, I am trying to get the hang of this technology. Let's see. Okay, it says that they're telling people that we're here. Caller is joined. Let's see what's going to happen. We are being patient. We have our patient hat on today.
Hello.
So
I had to go out and come back in.
You had to go out and come back in. Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay. I cannot see you. However, what I learned in my last video was that just because I cannot see you on the screen doesn't mean that the people that are watching us can't see us both on the screen. And so I'm going to just go with it and hope for the best. Now, as you're looking at me, can you see both of us on the screen or are you just seeing me?
I can see both.
It's so weird.
Excuse me. Yep, I can see you and I can see myself.
Okay, well, that means that we are rocking and rolling. I am talking to myself on this video. I hear your voice, but I'm talking to myself.
Yeah, just know I'm here with you.
You are there. So I'm going to imagine your beautiful, beautiful face on the screen with me today because I am not letting Instagram give me the business today like it did the last time, okay? All right. So thank you so much, Carla, for accepting my invitation to join me for this conversation. I love having authentic, honest conversations with people that have been through things. And because they have this lived experience, it's like their purpose just ignites and you can tell that it just drives them to as a passion, it just drives them to accomplish and to touch lives. And so in a really, really real practical way. So before we dig in, or as we dig in, I was just looking at your website and I wanted to just tell the people who we are talking to on this afternoon, okay? And I am going to read all of it. And let me tell you why I'm going to read all of it, because I think that sometimes we see people where they are now, and we're going to go back to like your story, your backstory, but I want to just start with where you are right now because you are in your flow. This conversation is about finding your epic flow. And I told you before that I like to have conversations for people who are in the process or have rehabilitated their lives. And so let me just talk to the people about who Carla Carlisle is, okay? All right, so it says that you earned your bachelor's in sociology from Indiana University. You were in human resources, American University in Washington, D.C., and an MS in organizational development from Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland. You have several certifications certifications. You're certified trauma-informed advocate by the Trauma-Informed Institution, Trauma-Informed Care, Peacekeepers Academy cohort, storytelling workshop, resource parent curriculum, trauma-informed care, certified question, persuade, respond, gatekeeper. And let me just go up a little bit more. It says that you worked with the FBI for years, for over a decade, and you also work with TIAA for 17 years
Yes.
in the area of technology.
I started when I was 5. Just so you know,
Started when you were 5, because you're not
5.
over 20 right now, right? And, listen, it says that you are a renowned and award-winning speaker. You have a TED Talk speech that is live even now. Speakers for Booz Allen and Hamilton, for NAMI, Charlotte, Living Waters, Recast. We love Recast in Charlotte, don't we?
Yay, we do.
American Foundation for Suicide. It goes on and on and on. You are accomplished. You are accomplished. You are doing the thing. How does it feel to be where you are right now? We're going to go backwards, but I want to know, are you actually experiencing this moment and like actually enjoying it?
I am enjoying it. It's really hard because being an entrepreneur is not easy. But what I would say is that sometimes I'm able to just woosah,
yeah,
which is amazing. I'm able to just woosah and say, look how far we've come. Because what I will share is that when I was going through my trauma, all those degrees meant nothing. Any certification meant nothing. Becoming my son's mom, none of that mattered. And so I've learned to just really celebrate and appreciate those moments. And I'm moving because I have animals and they are cutting up. So we're going on.
Listen, I saw on your website that you are, and I know that you are a dog mom and a boy mom. And so it's quite all right. It's quite all right.
Well, we're going outside because I'm not doing it.
Okay. So you are smelling the roses. You are smelling the roses as you go throughout your journey.
Yes, and I'm a big believer in taking time to smell the roses because it's something that we don't really do enough of. And I just think it's so important to do that. I really do. And
you're right.
For ourselves, like, we have to celebrate ourselves. It's not being boisterous. It's not anything negative. It makes the tough times tolerable.
Yeah. That's so good. That's so good. It makes the tough times tolerable because sometimes when you're in the struggle of becoming, it's like a burden and it feels so heavy. And you're like, am I ever going to get there? And so unless you stop and smell the roses, you do kind of feel exhausted within yourself because you're like, God, you feel like it's just never going to happen for you.
Right. And sometimes people may get the wrong impression when you're smelling the roses, but what I also learned is I can't live for what other people think. There is a lot of what I do strategically. And so people may not necessarily see all the details of what I'm doing, but the outcome can be wonderful. And a lot of times, just to be candid with you, I don't necessarily know the end game. Like, I know ultimately what I want to accomplish, but I let God order my steps.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it is. I have been a person who tried to control everything. And what I've learned through this whole journey is that I'm not really controlling anything. It's one thing to want to be informed of what's going on, to have a certain way you want to see things rolled out. But in terms of back in the day when I was working for the FBI, when I worked on Capitol Hill, when I did consulting, did I ever in a million years think that I would be an author or a
Yeah.
speaker
Yeah.
or doing workshops and all. Absolutely not.
Hmm.
So one of the things that I learned is just to be open.
Yeah. That's so good.
Yeah.
That's so good. And I want to, I'm going to make a note because I want to come back there, but I
Hmm.
don't want to get too far ahead without kind of
Okay.
introducing or kind of just talking about where you started. Like even on your website, when in your bio, it talks a little bit about your backstory in regards to what you had to overcome.
Yes.
Share some of that with our listeners.
Sure. So I was a married woman. We married kind of late. My husband and I experienced infertility. We
Mm.
went through in vitro fertilization. I got pregnant and miscarried. And it was a loss that I suffered really on my own because my husband had kind of disconnected. And we continued trying mainly because he wanted to. My goal was to be a mom. He really wanted to have a child by blood, a blood child
Mm-hmm.
relative. You know what I'm trying to say? He wanted to have it.
Biological child.
He wanted a, yes, that's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah.
And for me, yes, I would have loved that, but being a mom was much more important
Mm-hmm.
than having a biological child. And so when we divorced, maybe 2 years later, one of my good friends suggested that I become a foster parent. And that ended up the beginning of my journey to motherhood. And what a journey it was.
So you want to
What
share
a
about that journey?
Sure, I'd be
Because it,
happy
yeah,
to share.
yeah. Mhm.
And actually, you were kind of a part of that journey, right? You were a
Was,
part of
it
that
was,
journey.
yeah,
So
it was a
I be
long time
it
ago.
was a long,
I
long
always
time
tell
ago.
people I kind of look at my life in blocks of time. Like, okay, was this
Hmm.
before my son, before my daughter, after my daughter?
Yes,
And so this
yes.
is all I think when I was pregnant with my son, who's about to turn 14. So it tells you how long ago this was.
Uh, Maybe. So
Hmm.
JC is about to be 15.
Okay. Okay.
So
Wow, my
we
son
were
was
with
already
you.
born. Hmm.
Yeah, when we were with you, he was 6, 7, I
Yeah.
think. So I
Yeah,
think
he
that
was.
might have been
So it
well,
was
it might have been
after
post your
Kingston.
son.
Yeah,
Yes, yes,
that's after my son.
yes. So
Wow. Wow.
let me give the
Okay.
context. So
Think
I
about
became okay. So I became a foster mom, and the second time they reached out to me, they said, "Hey, we have this 10-day-old, 2-month premature baby boy, and what do you think?" And I did not want an infant. I was like, I don't think I can do that by myself, and so on and so forth. And so I said, how much time do I have? And they were like, now we'll go on to the next person. So I thought, oh my. So I made a couple quick phone calls and,
it.
to get, garner my support. And then the next thing you know, I'm picking him up with
Wow.
a car seat that I just stopped at the store and purchased, with preemie clothes that I just stopped
Wow.
at the store and purchased. And it was like, oh my goodness. Fortunately, I had a respite foster mom who was a friend who helped me in the beginning because I was totally lost. I'm not going to lie. I was not prepared for that. And, there were some things I had to do really quickly to prepare. But more so than that, it was connecting with his birth parents.
Mm.
And
Was
initially,
that a choice that you made to connect with his birth
no,
parents?
it was through the foster care
Okay.
process. So the Department of Social Services said we're going to have a CFT, which is a child family
See.
team meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so I had no idea what I was walking into, and it was a huge CFT. There was a big room. There were probably 10 plus, maybe 14 people there, and I was totally confused. Now, it
Yeah.
turns out that his mom had 11 children, and he was child number 11, and
Wow.
she had lost her parental rights to the other 10. And so there was a lot of focus, I guess, and attention on this specific child and this specific case. And after the CFT ended, which I think they were about an hour and a half late. And so I was like, what is going on? And this baby needs to be changed and fed and all these things. That's what I'm thinking about. And at the time, my focus was 100% on him, and it pretty much remained that way, although I grew to know her. And we had our first visitation after the CFT. And so that was my introduction to his mom, his birth mom, and it was overwhelming because almost immediately she started sharing with me some of her trauma and some of her challenges, and I felt like the most naive person in the world because I had no, I mean, you read things. I was always a mentor of girls, young girls, and things like that, and but this was on a different level.
Yeah.
This was
just in regards to what she had been through.
Yes. And I just had absolutely no idea. I had no idea that at such a young, tender age, I'm not saying I didn't know that things happen. Things do happen, of course. But to hear the intimate details from someone I just met and I'm charged with caring for her child, it was literally overwhelming. And then also throughout this process, I began to understand why she didn't trust anybody. Why would you trust someone when everyone who was supposed to take care of you did the opposite?
Yeah, and that's including biological dad too, because I believe he was in the picture as well for some periods of time.
So my son's biological dad was in the picture the entire time. And they had a very tumultuous relationship because both of them had experienced substantial trauma as children. And both of them grew up not trusting. He's about 10 years her junior. So he went from, being with mom and dad pretty much to being with her.
Wow.
So it was just a whole different world. And I remember my mom used to say, I just don't understand why she does this or why she does that. And I said, Mom, you have to take everything you know about life and throw it out the window.
Yeah.
Because
so you went from
about her life.
So you went from being kind of a naive young lady to
which only so naive because I worked for the FBI, I worked on Capitol Hill, I lived in DC. I mean, I wasn't a naive person.
Okay.
But when it came to trauma, yes, when it came to like real trauma, I'm not talking about there's physical trauma. Like I had been through a major car accident. Someone in our car died. I mean, I've been through physical trauma, but the emotional, mental
chronic
trauma,
chronic
abuse, neglect. I had not experienced that. Of course, I read about people who were hurt by their biological parents, who were hurt by step parents or aunts, uncles. And I'm sure there were people around me who experienced it, but it was something that we didn't talk about.
Yeah.
And
So you went from not kind of knowing that level of trauma to kind of being fully immersed and having to co-parent with someone who had experienced developmental trauma. How was that for you? How was that for you?
Well, initially it was more like I went from being appalled by her behavior to like, oh my God, who would I be if I had experienced what she did?
Yeah.
So it was such a humbling experience and lesson for me. I was like, no, I wanted her to see different. So what happened was when the child was 6 months old, there was a routine court date, and he was actually given to his mother as if he had never been taken. And so what that means is that there were no controls, there was no support, there were no check-ins or anything. And so I felt like that was a mistake based on what I learned and about her mental capacity.
Right.
Because she was dealing with not just bipolar disorder, that people function with bipolar disorder, but there were all the trauma and all that kind of thing without any support, without any help throughout her life. And
Mhm.
so it was very obvious. Of course, I didn't know this at the time, that she was she had so much on her plate that she didn't develop the skills and gain the tools to really take care of her children. I don't know if I
Mhm.
mentioned this or not, but she had lost her parental rights to her other 10
No,
children
you didn't.
before him.
Wow. Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I just saw her life and her outlook as so hopeless, and I didn't want her to feel that way.
Yeah.
I was also
So,
concerned about his safety. So
yeah.
I let my foster license expire, and for 6 years I co-parented with her and the birth
Yeah.
father.
What what did it take when you think about yourself
Hmm.
and how you had to develop through this co-parenting relationship that you developed
Hmm.
with the biological parents? What kind of skills, inner skills, did it take for you to kind of manage that experience well?
Well, some of them I did really well, and some of them I did horribly. So one of the things that I learned to do was to be still and to be quiet.
Mm,
And so that can be a good thing or that can be a really bad thing. And
mm-hmm,
what I mean by that is I stopped sharing with people who didn't understand. I
mm,
stopped sharing with people who didn't support what I was doing because what they saw was the toll it was taking on me. What I knew was I have a little baby here whose life is in jeopardy every day.
yeah,
And I need to be there because what do they say about, children who experience substantial trauma? It takes one loving advocate to change the trajectory of their
yeah,
lives, right? Of their life. So, and honestly, I felt the same way about his mom.
mm, mm,
Excuse me. I felt like I could be that person to help her gain some trust in
mm.
someone. I was
Was
so
that
naive.
was that a helpful kind of mentality to have, or do you when you look back
No,
in retrospect? Yeah,
in retrospect, I say I had on this superhero cape and I didn't know what the heck I was doing.
yeah,
I couldn't read the signs of things like substance use disorder. I remember talking to my therapist who said, Carla, that sounds like drugs. That doesn't sound like trauma. But now I
mm,
know that it could be both, right?
mm-hmm,
What I was seeing could be both in terms of behaviors.
yeah,
So there was a lot of immature behavior. And
yeah,
what I mean by immature, like I'm not trying to diminish her in any way, but what I saw was all the development that was supposed to happen, not all, but a lot of the development that was supposed to happen in the earlier years just simply didn't happen
yeah,
because she was just trying to stay alive. She was in survival mode.
mm-hmm,
And so that I learned so much just from that actual experience. 6 years being immersed into two people's lives with a little baby that I love with all of my heart
mm-hmm,
that did not have the skills to take care of themselves as I'm not talking about financially. I'm talking about emotionally,
yeah,
spiritually, uh, those 8 dimensions of wellness that SAMHSA talks about. There are so many different aspects of wellness that we don't even think about. Yes, there's financial, there's occupational, there are all these different aspects. But what I saw was that the skills just weren't there, or if they were there, they were based on generational curses
yeah,
and they weren't based on like real knowledge. And I don't mean
mm,
that in a demeaning way at all. Like, how can you, if you're trying to stay alive and protect yourself every day, how are you really learning in school?
you can't.
If you're
It's
if you're
hard.
hungry, or you're going on drug runs with your parents, and you have this person trying to molest you and that person trying
Mm,
to attack you, how do you focus and learn? And who are you even learning from?
wow.
And so it was super humbling because I grew up in a small town in Indiana. We were not rich, but my parents not only provided, they taught us the meaning of real
Yeah.
love, and
Yeah.
they ensured that we learned about respect. I
Yeah.
remember my dad saying, because my dad did not play about my mom. My dad said, "You may not like me, but you will respect your mom." And I
Yeah, that's so good.
always knew that. Yeah, that was that generation,
Yeah,
right? He's like, "You will respect your
absolutely.
mom,
Mhm.
period." And so I grew up like I will always respect my mom and my dad because it was just a given that that's how it was going to be.
That's the expectation, and we do
Yes,
what's expected of
yes.
us, right?
So
Yeah.
one of the skills that I did gain was to learn to really stand in somebody else's shoes. Now,
Empathy.
what I
Hmm.
did with that information was a different story because, again, I'm still using my point of reference in terms of how to make things work. So let's go get this service provider to help us.
Hmm.
No, she doesn't want people in her home.
Yeah.
She doesn't trust anybody to come in her home. I bought the house they were living in, put them in the
Wow.
house, provided all the groceries and everything, was going broke because I'm not rich, or I wasn't rich at the time. I'm claiming richness to
Okay.
being rich now, but
Okay.
but I
I
wasn't I
touch and
wasn't
agree.
at the time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Touch and agree.
Touch
Uh-huh.
and agree. Touch and agree. I'm
Yeah.
giving you the touch. Yes, touch and agree. Uh,
Touch and agree.
but yes. But what I learned was that I was so far in over my head, it was ridiculous. It's like I'm playing hopscotch and they're playing the game of life. Like, can we
Hmm.
survive? And
Hmm.
so it was so mismatched that I had to get educated. I had to switch my approach. And candidly, it wasn't until he was about 5 years old.
Hmm.
We were driving in the car. I was driving, she was in the front seat, and he was in the back, and we got into a disagreement. Now, if you can't tell, I'm a very outgoing person. I have a lot to say, lots of personality. But by this time, I had made myself very small to try to keep the peace.
Yeah.
This particular day, something said, "No, Carla, stand your ground." And I did, in a disagreement with her. And guess what happened? I
Uh-oh.
was driving and she slapped me across the face
Wow.
really hard. And I'll
Wow.
say hit me across the face. I think she kind of backhanded me across the face. And to some people, that's like, "Oh, yeah, that's happened." No, it's never happened to me. No,
That,
ma'am.
that's not ever going to happen, right? You never think that
Yeah,
that's going to be a part of your story,
right,
right? Like, where does this happen?
right.
Yeah.
So whenever I talk to law enforcement a lot, and whenever I talk to them, I tell them that part of the story, and I say, "What do you think I did?" And they say things like, "Oh, you hit her back. You did this. I don't know." They say all kinds of things, and none of those are what I did. What I
Mm.
actually did was I pulled over in a parking lot and I hit my knees and I said, "God, what I'm doing is not working.
Mm.
I need help." And that's the truth. And things started changing around that time in terms of my relationship with her. And just to reiterate, I had no legal rights to him. I had really no say so in what happened to him. His mom had to agree because she was his legal parent, as was his birth father.
And so,
Yes,
so the stakes were really high because you could lose him.
yes.
Yeah.
And every time I tried to pull away a little bit, let's say I wouldn't see him for a weekend, the next time I would see him, maybe he had a sprained ankle, maybe he had a bruise on his head, something happened. And so everything I did was fear based
Yeah.
until I stopped and I hit my knees and I just said, "This is not working. I'm trying to go
Hmm.
on off my own understanding, which sucks. Let's just be real. Like, I didn't know what I was doing."
Yeah.
And so I was advocating for him, but in a way that was very hurtful to me. Because at
Hmm.
this point, by the time I got custody of him, and I'll talk about that in a second, by the time I got custody of my son, I was 40, 50 pounds overweight. I was over
Wow.
$100,000 in debt. I had alienated myself from the people who loved me because no one understood what I was doing or why. They
And
knew
they're
I
like
loved
wondering
him.
why are you doing it when
Yes.
they're giving you, slapping you, right? This
Yes.
is, mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's not like I shared that with a lot of people, but I shared
Okay.
it with some. Yeah, I shared
Yeah.
it with some, and
And
the
they're
ones I did that,
questioning you because they don't see the full story that
yes,
you see.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I even, can you hear me
I
okay?
can hear you
Okay.
fine.
And one of the people who I leaned on the most said, if you don't get a restraining order, I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
I just cannot support you because you're going to end up hurt and then you can't help him. And I felt like that was the cruelest thing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It was rough, it was tough, but it was real.
So,
I just wasn't there yet.
so your supports began to get a little thinner because they felt like you needed to have stronger boundaries, I think is what I hear you saying.
I had zero boundaries.
Yeah.
I didn't even know the definition of boundaries at that time.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
being honest, because when you see this child you love with your fullest heart, that you did the skin to skin at, the first 6 months of his life, and you see him growing and you see him in environments where one house they were living in, there were so many mice that a snake showed up.
Wow.
How do I sleep comfortably when this child that I love so much is in danger? And yes, his mom was not in a good place either. Neither was the dad, but at least they were adults. Not saying that they had all the skills, but this is a baby.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so while their housing was so unstable, I was like, I'm going to get this house. I'm going to make it work. I'm going to provide her with something. And I went from, it started off when I first started getting him on the weekends, maybe giving her some money or bringing her some dinner that Sunday, when I would get him on the weekends, to him basically living with me and seeing them every day. Let's say he was with me 75 to 80% of the time because I had him in school.
Mm-hmm.
And she used to talk about him being overeducated. And I had never heard that term before.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like he knows too much for his own good.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was different for me. She had never heard of the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. I'm talking about a totally different perspective than I ever knew.
Mm-hmm.
And, you can call me naive, call me what you want, but I know now.
You know now.
I know now.
So
I
talk
know
to
that.
us. Go ahead.
Yes. No, I just said, I know that trauma can show up in every aspect of a person's life. Yeah. And one person's trauma is no greater or less than another's in terms of the impact it may have on your life.
Yeah, that's good. So you went from, we kind of walking through your journey, right? Mm-hmm. So now you're at the place where, okay, you're recognizing I need to develop boundaries for myself. Mm-hmm. Talk to us about that part of your journey in regards to, because we're talking about how did you develop your epic flow? A part of your flow, it sounds like, was, being hit with these life experiences that kind of changed you, who you were, mm-hmm. and you needed to create safety for yourself, which is the purpose of boundaries, right? Boundaries help keep us safe, it keeps other people safe, and it keeps relationships safe. So how did you develop boundaries in your life that help you to move forward in a healthy way?
So what happened was that when my son was 5, he started talking about suicide. And when he was 6, he tried to die by suicide. Wow. And let me tell you, when you have a child you love that wants to die by suicide, now mind you, he heard about suicide every day from his birth mother because that was a part of her story. That was a part of her journey. And she talked about it all the time. Initially, I didn't create boundaries. What I saw was I'm unable to keep him safe, so I need to do something different. That's what I saw. And so it was like, I have to start doing something different, but I didn't know what that was at the time. But I tried to pull back a little bit. And when my son ended up in behavioral health at the time, he was the youngest child. Not anymore. He was 6 at the time. I was like, no, this has gone too far. And I talked to my sister, I talked to uh, my nephew's wife who worked in mental health in Virginia, and I thought, okay, I need some help. Now, mind you, God is still leading me at this point, and we're talking about different options for how to proceed.
Yeah.
I just did not know what to do, and he was in behavioral health, so I'm like, okay, now he's safe. So what can I do? And so boundaries didn't come right away. What came right away was his safety.
Yeah.
And the understanding that I couldn't keep him safe if I wasn't safe. So
you noticing what needed to have boundaries in your life.
Yes.
The areas that needed to have protection.
Yes.
And so
I didn't make that connection at the time that these are boundaries.
Yeah. That's so good. And so what did you end up doing?
So I hired an attorney. He was not in the system, so this was a private attorney, a family law attorney from North or South Dakota, and I'll never forget, he was more naive than I was, about the whole situation. And there were 3 days that changed everything. Now, mind you, my son is in behavioral health. Day one, I called 3 different attorneys, found this attorney, we connected. That same day, his birth father fired the service provider I had found that they really wouldn't cooperate with. And I understood why, but at this point now, a young boy's life is in jeopardy, right? Day 2, the attorney said, bring me any evidence you have. I went to his office with 2 big cases of evidence. He said, have you heard of in locos parentis? And I said, no. And he's like, as if you're a birth parent, as if you are a parent. Can you prove that? I had pictures, I had texts, I had everything that showed that I was as much of a parent to him as they were.
Wow.
That same day, his birth father withdrew him from school. Day 3, my attorney got a domestic violence protection order against each of the birth parents because there were threats made against my life and my child. And he also got emergency custody for me of my child. That same day, the dad went to behavioral health to get his son, my son, out. Now, I was told by the Department of Social Services that they would have never let that happen. I can't say if that's true or not. I can say that I didn't feel confident. And so what ended up happening was they didn't let him on the floor because I immediately delivered those documents to the hospital.
Wow.
And then here I am with custody of this beautiful child who tried to die by suicide. And he's in behavioral health. And now I have all the responsibilities, and I'm in court every other day, all the time. For 2 years, I'm in court. Wow. And, oh, by the way, how do I parent him now? He's been through trauma unlike any that I've ever been. So I had to start getting educated. So everything I was doing was still for him, but I also recognized, girl, you better start taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
You don't start taking care of yourself, you can't take care of him. So it wasn't because I loved myself so much at that moment, because I wasn't even in the picture in my mind. It was about him.
Yeah.
And so that's why what I do now focuses so much on us taking care of ourselves, because literally we can't take care of anyone else if we can't take care of ourselves.
That's good. So the next step is what I'm hearing that you said is that you started installing boundaries, right?
Yes.
And out of those boundaries, you begin to, actually, it worked because you begin to be protected, and and that gave you a measure to protect your son. And it sounds like the next step for you was to gather information about what you needed things to look like.
Yes.
So you began to educate yourself. You started kind of developing your tribe. You reached out to the community,
Yes.
and that seems to have worked for you. Is that accurate?
Yes. It's
Yeah.
accurate. I mean, I literally would not have been able to do what I did without support,
Yeah.
period. I'm no superwoman. I retired that cape. It's packed away. I don't ever want to see it again. I know we say Black women are superheroes, but not me.
How did you do that part? Because I'm a therapist, and so I work with a lot of Black women and men, but the majority of my caseload right now are Black women who have the cape on. So I want you to talk to those women who have a difficult time taking that cape off in order to access their tribe.
Yes. So this is what I'm going to say, and I'm looking into the camera and I'm saying, sis, please stop trying to do it all by yourself. You will end up in the hospital. You will end up with some illness that you can't get over. You will end up sick physically, mentally, emotionally, because you don't have the skills to be a real superhero. You don't have them, and that's okay. We weren't made to be superheroes. What makes us really powerful, sis, and I mean this with everything in me, is learning how to ask for help.
That's so good.
Learning to gain support. And it may not look like any of the people who are in your life right now, or they may take on different roles. It doesn't mean you get rid of them. It just means, here's an example. I was over $100,000 in debt. My girls are my girls, but they couldn't help me with that. I had to find a money guru who didn't take the traditional path, an Asian American woman. Her name is Bernadette Joy. She's on Instagram, Bernadette Joy.
I am going to connect with her.
Yes,
We've been talking a lot about her. Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
Bernadette is amazing. And Bernadette said, Carla, hold on. First of all, do you understand the power of your story?
Yeah.
Do you understand that this can be a business? You can make money through helping people. I digress, but the bottom line is she helped me come out of all that debt. You know why I wasn't coming out of that debt? Because, I know how to budget and everything like that, because that debt was tied to my trauma. Yeah. That debt was tied to being abused and treated and cussed out and threatened for 6 years. So I didn't even want to look at it. So sis, my beautiful Black sisters, I'm telling you, you need to be okay. And when you're not okay, the way you get there is what? To ask for help, to firm up your support system. I had a family advocate from Mental Health America of the Central Carolinas through their Parent Voice program. If I didn't have her, her name is Amy Dickey. She's not with the program anymore, but if I had not had Amy, I wouldn't even know what to do with him as far as school, because there was no book. He wasn't a part of CMS. He was in a private school. They said, well, you got to put him in CMS first, and then when we have an opening at this facility, then he can go. No, that's going to be more traumatic for him. No, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
So I ended up with a spreadsheet with 45 names of service providers, individuals, etc. And I thought, if I'm struggling with this, with all the resources I have and how I would go hard for my kid. But what I didn't do was put on my own oxygen mask until I had to.
Yeah.
I had to put on my own oxygen mask, because if I could not breathe, I wouldn't be able to be alive to take care of him. And that's what I say in the workshops I do. What happens if you don't put on your mask first, like when you're on a plane? Oh, well, you can't breathe. What happens if you can't breathe? You die.
Yeah.
You can't help anybody if you are incapacitated, period. It's not selfish. And there's nothing to be ashamed of. And here's the other part. We will go hard for our kids, but we won't do the same for ourselves. What am I showing my child if I'm not willing to take care of myself? And he sees otherwise now. he sees, oh yeah, my mom's going to take care of herself now. She's going to do what she needs to do to be
That's
okay. Not that
so
I
good.
am all the time, but I will. I will do what I need to do because we're always going to have these moments where we're not okay.
Yeah.
And it could be a season of not feeling okay.
Yeah.
Even when I'm doing workshops, I will say to the other facilitators, this is not, I had a rough morning. We had a hard time getting him to school this morning. I need some support. And sometimes I even talk about it with other parents when we're doing workshops because it's real life.
It's relatable. It is
Yes,
relatable. We
yes,
are in real life. And
yes,
I love that perspective, because the one thing that we as parents don't recognize sometimes is that we are our children's role
yes,
models, including because they are going to experience life stress
yes,
too. So they need to have a model of, when I am stressed, when life is kicking my butt, what do I do?
yes,
What do I do? And
absolutely.
we, especially as we take care of ourselves, in addition to taking care of everyone else and all the responsibilities that we juggle, it's important for them to see that it's okay to put on your own mask, as you say. I love, love, love that
Absolutely.
perspective.
Absolutely. And there was a thought. I remember I didn't feel this personally because I'm a very practical person.
Mhm.
Like if I do something, just like when I started working with, dealing with his birth parents, everybody said, you're going to regret this. And I said, maybe I will, but it's worth it,
Yeah.
period. I usually go into most things with my eyes wide open. I may not know everything that's going to come from it, but what I know for sure, and I'm going to go back to my Black sisters,
Yeah.
is that I deserve to be healthy and joyful,
Yeah.
and you deserve the same. And if we
Yeah.
are always in crisis mode, if we're coming from a place of fear or a place of lack, we are getting in the way of our blessings.
That's so good. And so for you in your life story, you had someone come alongside you once you created those boundaries that showed you that, wait a minute, this was a way out of
Yes,
the struggle. Finding
yes,
your rest was the way of
yes.
kind of proceeding throughout life.
Hmm.
Talk about how you found your epic flow. How did you take that part of your life, the
Hmm.
advice that coach gave you, and
Hmm.
transition to where you are now?
Hmm. Oh my goodness. How that is a huge question. I think
Hmm.
it just happened over time. It's I don't ha I like to learn. I don't like to be told like things that feel demeaning.
Hmm.
I don't like to be, I don't like anyone to minimize somebody else. I don't want to do that to anyone else. But what I will do is learn and listen. So I'll give you an example. You may or may not know this. I think I told you, but one of the first books I developed was My Big Notebook. And
Hmm.
the majority of what's in that book came from lessons I learned from you.
Oh,
When
wow.
when JC, my son, was at Alexander Youth Network, that was many years ago.
Many
We
years
went
ago.
through trauma, yes, we went through trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy with you. And I was a part of the process. And I learned and I took notes and I listened and I did more research and we did games and he shared his trauma stories with me. And I thought, this kid is absolutely amazing. I better step
Yeah.
up my game, right?
Yeah.
I better
Yeah.
step up my game and
Yeah.
elevate
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
if he is doing all of this with support, I better be taking care of myself too. I better
Yeah.
start modeling for him. There were times through this journey, even as recent as a few months ago, where I felt totally inadequate.
Mm.
But instead of me sitting in that space, I'm going to learn. I'm going to tap on somebody's shoulder
Hmm.
who's either been there, knows about it. I'm involved in a lot of research studies now on youth suicide prevention, particularly Black youth suicide prevention. I've learned so much from these individuals, and a lot of them are clinicians, a lot of them are medical professionals, and they've learned as much from me because I've sat in that seat.
Mhm.
And so rarely do I learn from someone and they don't learn from me as well. It's
Yeah.
usually a mutually beneficial relationship.
Yeah.
And even if it's not, if I'm just pulling from the person, they're going to get something out of it. It's
Yeah.
not,
That's
it's
good.
not, it's never a using situation.
Yeah.
You know, people don't always necessarily see. I'm putting on my I'm putting on my charger now. People don't always see the method to your madness,
Yeah.
you know, or the why behind what you're doing. But there is a why, and it is important. And so what I would say is, where I am now, I created my big notebook to help young people learn how to process their feelings. And
Mhm.
I remember seeing a young boy who played football with JC when he was younger, after he was at Alexander Youth Network, and this boy happened to be at Alexander Youth Network at the same time.
Wow.
And what I saw was he had such a hard time controlling his emotions. What I also saw were his parents who were cursing him out in front of everybody, yelling, screaming, cussing. And the coach pulled me aside because he knew I had done my big notebook, and he said, "Hey, I need your help, but we're going to have to let this kid go." And,
Mhm.
you know, I couldn't be at every single practice, but I remember one time he had a particularly tough time. And I remember taking him for a walk. We just started walking. We didn't even really say anything in the beginning. And he just kind of melted into me. Like he
Mhm.
just needed a safe space. And so I said, if I'm not supporting parents, then I'm doing our children a disservice. All these
Yeah.
lessons I've learned and continue to learn, let me start sharing those.
Yeah.
And
That's
then when
good.
I started working with Mecklenburg County Department of Public Health with the RECAST program, doing workshops using my big notebook, they said, hey, will you do a book for young adults? Because our kids, our young adults are struggling.
Mhm.
They're dealing with big things. They're dealing with school shootings. They're dealing with community violence, gun violence, domestic violence, anything you can think of. And I said, absolutely. And so I created my Epic Flow, and I learned as I created it because we talked to young people. Heal Charlotte took many young people who had been directly impacted by gun violence to Camp Thunderbird, and we went with them, or we met them there. And I had completed my Epic Flow, the book, and then I talked to these kids. We did a
Mhm.
workshop,
Mhm.
and I felt like the book was light, but I just didn't know where. Talking to them, I added 18 pages to the book, and I said,
Wow.
it was about fear. It was about not feeling heard. That's one of the number one things I hear from our young people. I don't feel heard. People
That's
want
so
to
good.
tell me, people want to tell me things and teach me things, but they don't want to hear what I have to say.
Yeah.
And so I love that we're able to listen to them.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then I had to check myself. How much do I listen to my own
That's
child?
so good. Mhm.
Okay. So
Mhm.
I'm growing through all of these interactions, it's making me better, a better parent, a better person, and I'm just flowing. When I tell you, like,
Mhm.
think the stars have aligned, God has put forth a path, and I'm able to help people in healthy ways for me
Yeah.
and maintain my boundaries.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. So fine. So we have a few minutes left. I want you to directly tell the listeners
Hmm.
if who are struggling, who have experienced the traumas, much like your son's
Hmm.
parents, and
Hmm.
they are trying to what I call rehabilitate their life.
Hmm.
Give them a thought in regards to how do they find their epic flow despite the experiences that they've
Hmm.
had. How do they find that flow that you have found so gracefully and that you are flowing in?
Yeah. So what I would say to any parent who has experienced trauma, your child may have experienced trauma. I mean, we all did through the pandemic, right? We've all
Yeah.
been through some tough times. Some have been horrific times. What I would say is, first and foremost, you are worthy and you are deserving. You owe it to yourself, and you are modeling for your children. And so it's not something you can just pull out of your hat. I created this empowerment triad, and it's based on 3 tenets. It's awareness. What is it? What is intergenerational trauma? What does it even mean? It's trauma that's been passed down from one generation to the next, but it even goes back to slave days, right? It impacts our DNA. So don't put that weight on your shoulders. This is something that was bestowed upon you, right?
Yeah.
The acceptance is, what does it look like for me and my family? How does intergenerational trauma, how does trauma impact my family and me? That's just being accepting what it looks like. You're not accepting that it's okay. You just know what it looks like now. And then the advocacy is the 3rd tenet of the empowerment triad. And the advocacy says, what can I do about it? What is within my control and what is outside of my control? Can I get help with it? Can I ask somebody to help me?
Yeah.
And then what do I need to accept? But here's what I can change. Because I was yelled at as a child, and I see that I'm continuing that with my child. I can make a decision that I'm going to work on it. Maybe through therapy, maybe in a different way. Maybe I just need an outlet. Maybe I need another outlet. There are a multitude of things you can do. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but what I am saying is this: for your own health and happiness, you deserve to go through that process and to start really taking good care of yourself. And your children are watching. I'm not saying that in a judgmental way, because I by no means am a perfect parent. And have I ever yelled at my son? Absolutely. I am human.
Human, yeah.
But do I try to make it a practice? No, I check myself. And I have some accountability partners too. Because we call it pods, and we talk about this in My Epic Flow, the book. Who's in your pod? Who is it that you can count on? And it may be that I have a professional pod that is my therapist, that is this service provider, this agency, this professional that I know, Taisha, you know what I'm saying? It's all these professionals I know. And I have my personal pod, I have my crew. And so you leverage these different people in your life. And then also, when you have the bandwidth, you can do the same for somebody else. But you got to do it for yourself first.
I love that so much, Carla. And these are the notes that I've taken. In order to find your epic flow, it sounds like you have to, number one, develop the awareness that you don't enjoy or don't even like where you are. Not in judgment, just in awareness, right? And the next step for you had been to find your ability to create the boundaries that you need, that allowed you to then rest. Once you found that rest, you were able to find the support that you needed in order to move forward and create what was in your heart to create. And from that, you were able to pay it forward with it. While you were in the flow, you were able to pay it forward with others and to others. And that's exactly what you embody. I have completely, I feel like I have learned so much about you in this hour.
And you know
about
me,
your journey,
right?
and I already knew a little about you, right? And so, but I've learned so much about you. So I appreciate you coming on and being so open and honest with all of us about your life experience, and how you developed your epic flow. And so my hope, and I know that might be trying to speak for Carla. I'm gonna let her speak for herself. But my hope is that anyone listening will take the jewels from your experience and find their epic flow. Employ all of these skills of resting, boundary setting, accessing support, and paying it forward. Accessing all of those skills. Those are jewels that Carla dropped on us today. And using those to kind of get your life where you desire for it to be. That is a gift that you give yourself. And so the invitation is always there for you to make that choice to give that to yourself. Last last words, Carla, before we end today?
I'll just go back to what I said initially, and I believe this wholeheartedly. I say, I am worthy. You are worthy.
Yeah.
We are worthy of health and wellness and joy. And that's just the bottom line. And it starts there. Even if you don't believe it, say it to yourself every day. Look in the mirror and say that. I used to tell my son, fake it till you make it. And I'm not a big fan of that, but it is important to say it and embrace it. Let it become a habit for you, and just know, and I'm going to talk to my Black sisters and brothers, you are so worthy. You are so important.
Yeah.
And if you don't know, now you know.
Yeah, that's so good. Thank you so much for that, Carla. Absolutely. I love where this conversation went, because next week we have Daisy Grant coming on, and she's talking about building your tribe of support. And so it's so interesting that support and tribe and community was such an integral part of your journey.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone listening, or whoever's going to catch the replay, because I know it's lunchtime, make sure you come back next week, because Daisy's going to tell us how to build the tribe, So
I love that.
Carla, it's always a pleasure to connect with you.
Absolutely.
And I know that we are collaborating in some ways.
Yes.
And so I am so happy to have you in my life. I tell people that when you were at AYN, you mentioned being at AYN earlier, when you were at AYN, I knew then that, gosh, there's something about her.
Oh, really?
And I remember saying, I told you how one day you said, do they not know who I am?
I did say that, yes.
That always stuck with me. I was like, it's something about that one right there.
Yes, I did.
And I was like, I want her to be a part of my life. And I am appreciative that all these years later, that now you are actually a part of my life. Yes. And so I appreciate you so much, and cannot wait to continue to collaborate with you. Okay.
Let me tell you a little quick story about that, and then I know we have to go.
Sure.
One quick story. When I was saying, don't they know who I am? It was
don't they know who I am?
Yes,
I was like, yes.
It was about being a mom, but it wasn't about me. And so now when I say, don't you know who I am? I'm not being cocky or anything. I'm just saying I'm gonna go as hard for myself as I do for my kids.
Absolutely.
And for the people who I'm now connected with. Like,
absolutely.
That's what it is.
Like, and you mean it. Like, you really, like, that is, I can tell that is a value that you carry deep within your heart. So we appreciate you. We appreciate you for all that you are giving to our community. We really do. So, all right. Well, I will chat with you later. Thank you for coming on for our Girl Talk.
And thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.